Okay guys, so welcome back again. So first of all, a very happy new year to you guys. So in this video, let's see that what you should learn in 2022 if you want to be a software developer. So without wasting any time, let's see that what you should learn if you want to be a web developer or if you want to be a mobile developer. So before we begin, just hit the subscribe button and do like the video in case you like the video if you watch till the end. So here as we can see that here we have two paths. Either if you want to be a mobile developer or you want to be a web developer. So let's see that what you should learn in 2022 if you want to be a web developer. So first of all, there are three things in the web development. Firstly, the front end, the backend developer, and the database developer. Basically, database is tied to the backend. So we would be looking into the database later on when we'll be talking about the backend stuff. So first, let's see that what you should learn if you want to be a front end developer. So the basic three things that you should learn is firstly HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It is the meat of front-end development. That is, if you know only these three things, that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, then you can make any website out there on the internet. So these three things are a must. Even if you want to become a backend developer, then also I would highly recommend that you should learn at least these three things, that is HTML, CSS, and a bit of JavaScript. Because every website that is made uses these three things, that is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So you should learn all the three things. So if you don't know that what HTML and CSS and JavaScript means, I would be explaining them very briefly. Basically, whatever text you see on your page, that is whatever buttons you see, whatever uh, text you see is HTML. That is all the document that you see is HTML. The styling of that document is done using CSS. That is, you want to place some button here, then you want to use CSS, then there. If you want to place some button here at the very top corner, or top right corner, then you want to use again CSS. So basically CSS is used for styling and it is an acronym for cascading style sheets. So therefore we call it CSS. This is the document, that is the text. This is the styling. And what if you want to interact with that button? That is, whenever you click on this button, there is some element here and you want to move this element to this part of the page. Then to do that, you need JavaScript. Or if you want to make some calls to another website, that is, or an API. If you don't know that what an API is, don't worry. If you simply want to do something while you are interacting with your page, so to make that page interactive, you need to use JavaScript. So that is the bare bones you should learn if you want to be a web developer. So now after learning CSS, what you can learn about certain frameworks like Bootstrap, Tailwind, and there are many other frameworks like Materialize CSS and so on and so forth. So basically in those frameworks, what you can do, you can instead of using CSS directly, they have some classes which you can use directly inside your HTML document so that they are styled accordingly. So I would recommend in 2022 that you should learn Tailwind instead of Bootstrap, because each and every website on the internet uses Bootstrap. And if you make your site using Bootstrap, then they are pretty similar looking. But instead, if you were using Tailwind, then you can customize the behavior of your website or the look and feel of your website very differently, and it would not be the same as any other website. So I would highly recommend Tailwind here, not Bootstrap. And once you learn JavaScript, then for the front-end development, you should move ahead to learning either React.js, either Angular, or either Vue. And I would be coming to this TypeScript later on. So basically what these three things are, they allow you to make single page application, and which means that at the very first load of your website, only a one document is served, that is one HTML document is served, and whatever interactions and everything is that is going on your website is done using these frameworks that are built upon JavaScript, that is React, Angular, or Vue. And in this thing, I would say that you should be learning React.js and not Angular. And if you are not learning React.js, then you should consider Vue, because the learning curve of Angular is too steep. That is, I literally myself gave up learning Angular because I was spending a lot of time in learning Angular and I saw that it is not as useful as compared to other libraries like React or Vue. So in case you are not learning React, then you should consider Vue and not Angular. That is my personal preference. And once you learn React, that is, the learning curve of React is super easy. That is, it follows the 80-20 rule, which means that you would learn about 80% of the things in 20% of the time. And once you learn React, then you should start learning frameworks that are built upon React.js. And my favorite one is Next.js. So basically, Next.js allows us to do server-side rendered applications. So typically what happens in a typical React application is that only a single web page is served, and whatever interaction and whatever changes you see on the page is done using JavaScript that is bundled along at the very first load of your website. And what happens if you use Next.js? It simply serves plain HTML. There is almost no hydration on the client side, though client side hydration is also possible. But whenever I request a page from a server, only the HTML is served along with the CSS and almost no JavaScript. So it is super fast and it is also SEO friendly. Otherwise, you can also consider learning Gatsby, but I would recommend Next.js over Gatsby. And this framework, that is Remix.js, it's a new kid on the block, and it is made by the same guys behind React Router DOM, if you know about that, but never mind. It does not matter that who made it. But the beauty of this Remix.js is this, that it is again used for doing server-side rendering. And if you know Next.js, then picking up Remix would be super simple. Only the difference between two is the way of doing things. But in my case, that if you want to learn a framework on React.js, I would definitely recommend learning Next.js compared to any of the other two frameworks like the Gatsby or the Remix, because Next.js has been around there for quite a lot of time and it has great community support as compared to Gatsby or Remix.js. So I would highly recommend learning Next.js. So once you learn React.js and you want to do some styling on your web page, then either you can use the plain CSS libraries like Tailwind or Bootstrap, but there are pretty good UI libraries out there for React, and that is Chakra UI, and Design, and Material UI. So Material UI is built by Google itself, that is the Material Design Guidelines. It is built upon the Material Design Guidelines, and then there is and Design, and then there is Chakra UI. And here I would definitely recommend learning Chakra UI, because like if you are using Material UI, then it would be looking like too Googleish, and I don't personally I don't like it. But if you like it, then you can definitely consider learning Material UI. But the learning curve is again steep as compared to any of the other two libraries or other two UI libraries. And in my opinion, you should learn Chakra UI, because you would learn most of the things, that is 80% of the things, in only 20% of time. So what I would say, that learn React, then choose a framework of your choice. Either choose Next.js, Gatsby, or Remix, depending on you. I would say Next.js, and then pick up a UI library, and then I would recommend learning Chakra UI. And I won't be talking much about Angular, because to me it is like you should never consider learning Angular until and unless required. You should be learning React.js. But if you want to learn Vue, then learn Vue and then choose a framework. Like we have frameworks here, that is Next.js, Gatsby, and Remix.js. Here we have a framework called Nuxt.js. You can consider learning Nuxt.js when you learn Vue. And now let's have a look at one more thing, and that is why I put TypeScript here. So once you learn JavaScript, either you can follow this path, that is learning the libraries like for the front end, that is the React.js or Angular or Vue. But if you want to up your game, you should be definitely consider learning TypeScript, because TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. Because for those of you who don't know, Java is not a statically typed language. So you can mix up types, and then later on, if your project goes big, then you might be having difficulties in maintaining that project. So I would highly recommend learning TypeScript so that your application is type safe. So definitely consider learning TypeScript if you learn JavaScript. And whatever technologies are present here, that is React and Next.js, Gatsby, Remix, and whatever is there, then you can simply replace JavaScript with TypeScript in each of these frameworks, that is Next.js, Gatsby, Remix, or if you are using plain React, then you can also use plain React.js with TypeScript. So that's all what I would recommend for front-end development. So now let's have a look at the backend development. So in backend development, you have a couple of things. Either you can learn the very simple thing, that is Firebase, and it is provided by Google, and it has all the built-in functionalities or built-in small packages which you need to make your backend. So definitely consider Firebase. If you simply want to start your game as a solo developer, simply consider using Firebase as the go-to tool. And then what you can do, you can create your backend using any of the different programming languages. So you can either use JavaScript or TypeScript, or you can use Python, or you can use Ruby, or you can use PHP. And in my opinion, like using PHP in 2022 is not the thing to do. So the thing to do in 2022 is JavaScript. And why? Because since you already know JavaScript from the front-end development, so JavaScript is used both in the backend and in the front end. So there is a runtime based on JavaScript, and that is called Node.js. And this is something else. I would be talking about this later on. So basically, Node.js is a JavaScript runtime based on the Google Chrome OET engine. So in simple words, it uses JavaScript at the backend side. That is, it allows you to run JavaScript outside the browser. So that's what it simply does. And then once you know that how Node.js works, you just need to know a brief about Node.js. And then what you can do, you can learn a single framework that is based upon Node.js, and that is called Express. Though there are many other frameworks like the Koa framework that is again based on Node.js, and there are plentiful of frameworks that are based upon Node.js. But in 2022, again, I would highly recommend learning Express because it is the easiest framework for you to learn, and it would supercharge your development, that is the backend development, and you can simply make your API endpoints or your backend application with super ease using the Express framework. And if you want to know that how to use an Express framework, then you can watch my video that is linked above. And then again, I talked about Koa. It is another framework that is based upon Node.js. So if you are not preferring to learn Express, then learn Koa. But in my opinion, you should be learning Express and not Koa. Though if you want, you can learn Koa also. But in my opinion, instead of learning Koa, you should be learning the Strapi CMS for APIs. It is kind of a CMS that is based upon JavaScript, and it uses the Koa framework. So if you learn Strapi, you would be having an admin panel that is baked into your application, and you would be super easily creating your API endpoints. You would be having authentication built in using the JWTs in Strapi framework. So if you want to build something for yourself, or if you have a definite idea that what your API is gonna do, then you should definitely consider Strapi CMS. It's a pretty good choice to do. Otherwise, if you know Python, then you have two options again, Django and Flask. Both are great libraries, or both are great frameworks that are based upon Python. So if you want to build a very simple API, go for Flask. If you want to build a large application, go for Django. There are a couple of very big applications or very big projects that are based upon Django, as far as I know. So if you have heard about Dropbox, that is again built on Django. If you have heard about Instagram, then that is again based on Django. So it is a very powerful framework. But again, I would say that if you know Python and if you want to make a simple API, then consider Flask. Otherwise, if your application is too big or it has multiple things going on at the very same time, then consider Django. And since I'm not a Ruby developer or a PHP developer, though I know PHP and Ruby a little bit, so if you if you have any knowledge about Ruby, then consider Ruby on Rails. It is a de facto framework for Ruby. And if you know PHP, then you have two options. Either you can use plain old WordPress or you can use Laravel. I would say use Laravel. When you should learn WordPress? If you simply want to build application for your clients, and not applications, I'm not talking about applications here. I'm simply talking about simple websites. If you want to make them for your clients, then you can definitely consider using WordPress, because it has like pre-built themes which you can buy from different places that you can simply install on your WordPress site, and your WordPress site looks different. So if you simply want to make a simple website for your clients, then only use WordPress. Or if you want to do plugin development for WordPress, then also you can learn PHP. But in my opinion, you should not consider learning PHP anyhow in 2022, because I myself used PHP like a couple of years ago, like say 4 or 5 years ago, I used PHP. But according to me, like I don't want to use PHP anymore, and I just hate the PHP code. When I see it, it is like too ugly looking. Though many of you would say that PHP is a very mature language and so many things are built upon PHP, but in my opinion, like if you're watching this video, then definitely don't consider using PHP in 2022. You should be definitely considering JavaScript and then TypeScript to build your own backend. And then we have the databases here. So you do not need to actually learn that how these all databases work, but instead you only need to learn that how do you query this database, or which database you want to use. So as we see here, we have listed a couple of databases here. So MongoDB is a NoSQL database. Postgres, MySQL, and SQLites are SQL databases, as the name suggests, because they use tables, and each of the rows in that table has the same properties. Whereas in a NoSQL database, any document, that is any row on your inside your table, can have different elements. Like one row can have first name and last name, and another row, I'm simply calling it row instead of document for ease, and another row can have first name, middle name, and last name. So that is what a NoSQL database means. So, And then we have this Redis thing here, that is a key value storage, and it is like a super fast database storage as compared to any of the other four. So when you should learn each of these databases? And the answer is this, that you do not need to know the ins and outs of each of these databases. You simply need to know that how do you query these databases. And there is where these ORMs comes in handy. It is basically a layer between, or a glue between your database and your backend application. So let's have a look at the ORMs here. So here we have typical ORMs here, and again I'm only choosing the ORMs for JavaScript here. So here we have the Mongoose ORM, that is specifically to connect your MongoDB database, that is this MongoDB database, with your Node.js application or from your Node.js application. And then we have the Prisma ORM. The beauty of this ORM, that is this Prisma ORM, is this, that you can use any database and you need to write similar syntax to query any of the databases here. So whatever database you use here, you need to write similar queries. So if your client says, or if your company requires you to use MongoDB, then you can simply use Prisma ORM. It can connect to MongoDB. If your company uses Postgres, then again you can simply use Prisma ORM, because it can connect to Postgres also. It can connect to MySQL also. It can connect to SQLite also, but it cannot connect to Redis as of now. So if you are sure that you want to use only MongoDB in your application, then I would say that use MongoDB with Mongoose. If you want to use Postgres or MySQL or SQLite with your application, then I would say that use Prisma. Though there is one more option, or a couple of more options are there, which I have not mentioned here. There is one great library, that is TypeORM, but as far as I've seen them both, that is Prisma as compared to TypeORM, Prisma has a very short learning curve and it does almost all the things as compared to any of the other ORMs. And Prisma APIs are super simple to write and to query your database. So finally, in 2022, I would highly recommend you learning MongoDB with Mongoose if you want to use NoSQL database. If you want to use the SQL database, then instead of using MySQL or SQLite, you should be using Postgres as your database with Prisma. And this Redis thing is you should use only when you know that what you want to do. That is, if you want to do some caching on your backend server, then you should definitely consider using Redis. If you want to store some tokens on your server, then you should again consider using Redis. So that's all what we have for the databases here. So now let's have a look at the mobile development in 2022. So here we have two things. Firstly, you need to decide that whether you want to do only Android development, or you only want to do the iOS development, or you want to develop cross-platform applications. So firstly, let's have a look at Android. So in Android, you have two options. Either you can learn Java to develop an Android application, or you can learn Kotlin. So if you're watching this video now, then I would definitely say learn Kotlin, because like if you were watching this video like 3 years back, then I would have definitely said Java, that is learn Java to develop Android application. But in 2022 again, Java is almost dead for Android development, because everyone is using Kotlin as their basic programming language for developing Android applications. And if you want to know the learning curve of Java versus Kotlin, then I would say that Kotlin would be much easier to pick up as compared to Java. And whatever you can do in Java in 100 lines of code, maybe you can do that in only 15 to 20 lines of code in Kotlin. So consider using Kotlin in 2022. And if you want to be an iOS developer, then again you have two language options. Firstly, the Objective-C and then the Swift. So Objective-C is again pretty much dead in new iOS application. No one uses Objective-C as their primary language for building iOS applications. Everyone uses Swift. And to me, if you would ask me that what is my favorite language, I would say Swift. Okay, so now you might be asking that people are talking about storyboards and Swift UI. So what is that stuff? So basically, when we develop applications for iOS, previously, like 2 years back or 3 years back, we were supposed to use the storyboard thing, in which you can draw your layout, that how your layout would look like, and then you could connect that layout with your code, and then your code would be doing something. So pretty much you lay out your things on the storyboard, that is simply the canvas thing, and then you would connect that button or that text field with the code that is written in Swift, and then you would be like interacting with that canvas using the code thing. So that is what was the storyboard stuff. And now there is something else that is called Swift UI. And here you do not have any canvas or something like that. It basically uses code to lay out your stuff on the canvas or on the screen. I would say that if you want to be an iOS developer in 2022, learn Swift and then learn Swift UI, and you are good to go. And you can make any of the iOS applications that are out there. And now there is something else, that is, you might ask me that I want to develop applications for both of the platforms, that is Android and iOS. So what do I do? Should I learn Kotlin or should I learn Swift or Swift UI? So I would say that if you want to build applications for both of the platforms, then simply leave learning Kotlin or Swift. Simply learn Flutter or React Native. And now, what is this Flutter and this React Native? Flutter is based upon the Dart language, and it is very easy to pick up. And React Native is again based on JavaScript. So if you are coming from a web development background, that is, if you already know that how React.js works and what is React. So basically, React Native is a layer on top of React.js. I would say that. And if you already know that how React works and how JavaScript works, and you are super comfortable with JavaScript, then learn React Native. But if you do not know that how JavaScript works or how Dart works, then I would say that learn Flutter. Flutter has a great community support, and Flutter is backed by Google itself. And there is a simple difference between Flutter and React Native, is this, that in React Native, if you want to lay out a button on Android and in iOS device, then the button would be defaulted to their default buttons as they were present on the Android device and on the iOS device. They won't be looking similar. But in Flutter, if you want to lay out a button on the canvas using simply a button thing, then those two buttons would be looking exactly similar on the iOS device as well as the Android device. So I would say that learn Flutter in 2022 and not React Native if you are not coming from a JavaScript background, and if you are new to both platforms or both languages, that is Dart and JavaScript. Learn Flutter. It would make your life a hell lot easier as compared to learning both of the platforms. Learn Android and iOS. And there you would also need to learn two different languages, that is Kotlin and Swift. So I would say that go with Flutter with Dart, and it is very easy to learn Flutter, and again it has a very good community support. And if you want to harness the 100% power of the device, that is, if you want to do something exceptionally powerful, by power I mean that if you want to harness the full power of the device, that is, currently in iOS you have the A15 Bionic chip, and in Android you might be having like different processors. So if you completely want to harness the full power of the hardware, then you should be using the native programming languages for that device. But that is a rarity. And in typical cases, you should be developing applications that are not so much resource consuming. So learn Flutter in 2022. So these are the things which we talked about mobile and development. But either you are a mobile developer or a web developer, you must at least know these four things. That is, you must know that what Git is, you should have a basic understanding of some Linux command, you should have a basic understanding of terminal, and you should be knowing some design tools like Figma, so that you can lay out your application, that is how it would look like. And if you don't know that what Git is, it is simply a version control system. In simple words, as you write codes, you can make checkpoints in your application so that you can go back in time and see that what was the code at that time before. So you should definitely consider learning Git. Whatever technology you are learning in 2022, you should be definitely consider learning Git. And if you don't know that how Git works, then you can watch my video or a series about Git that is linked at the top here. And you should definitely know that certain Linux command, because once you make your application or you create your application, ultimate thing is to deploy that application. And to deploy that application, you need to learn a bit of Linux command, not so much, but you should be having a very basic idea about that. And why I say that you should have a basic understanding of terminal, because if you are creating your own VPS on DigitalOcean or on AWS or like any other platform to create your VPS, then to interact with that VPS or that server, you need to use terminal. You do not have a GUI there. You can only issue commands to your VPS using the terminal thing. And then for the design tools, I already talked about, that is, you should have a very basic understanding, or a very mediocre understanding about how your design would look like. So I would say that you can use Figma, or if you are on a Mac, then you can use Sketch. so that you can simply lay out your application. And this is all that you should know if you want to be a software developer. So guys, that's all about this video. So if you have liked the video now, then I would say please like the video, and if you haven't subscribed till now, do subscribe to the channel. It motivates me a lot. So thank you, bye bye, tata, take care, and happy new year once again.